He was called Il Divino, the Divine One, while he was still alive. Michelangelo Buonarroti, born on March 6, 1475, in a tiny Tuscan village that now bears his name, would become the most feared, admired, and imitated artist in history. Sculptor, painter, architect, poet, he mastered every medium he touched and then shattered the rules of each. Alongside Leonardo da Vinci, he is the ultimate symbol of the Renaissance, a man who believed the human body could reveal the mind of God. His childhood was humble and hard. His mother died when he was 6. Sent to live with the stonecutter's family in Setignano, he grew up surrounded by marble dust and the ring of hammers. "With the milk of my nurse," he later said, "I sucked in the hammer and chisels I use for my statues." School bored him. Churches thrilled him. At 13, against his father's wishes, he apprenticed to Domenico Ghirlandaia, Florence's finest fresco painter. A year later, he was living in the palace of Lorenzo de' Medici, Il Magnifico, copying ancient statues in the Medici gardens, and listening to philosophers argue that beauty is the visible trace of the divine. At 17, his nose was broken in a fistfight with a jealous rival. The crooked profile became his trademark. At the same age, he carved the Battle of the Centaurs, a furious tangle of naked muscle that already showed his obsession with the male body under extreme stress. Lorenzo died in 1492. Florence fell into chaos. Michelangelo fled, wandered to Bologna, and returned. In 1496, at 21, a clever deception brought him to Rome. He carved a sleeping Cupid, artificially aged it, and sold it as an antique. When the buyer discovered the fraud, he was so impressed he summoned the young sculptor instead of punishing him. Rome gave him his first immortality. Cardinal Jean de Bilhers commissioned a Pieta for St. Peter's. Michelangelo chose a single flawless block of Carrara marble, and in secret carved the Virgin cradling her dead son. Mary is impossibly young, her face serene. Christ's body is limp, polished, heartbreakingly beautiful. When people asked who had made this miracle, Michelangelo crept into the basilica at night and carved his name across Mary's sash, the only work he ever signed. Back in Florence, in 1501, the city needed a symbol. A gigantic, half-ruined block of marble had defeated every sculptor for 40 years. Michelangelo asked for it. For 3 years, he worked alone behind a wooden fence. When the doors opened in 1504, David stood revealed, 17 feet of coiled power, veins bulging, eyes fixed on an unseen enemy. Florence placed the statue in front of the city hall as a warning to tyrants. This is what a free republic looks like. In 1505, Pope Julius II summoned him to Rome to build the most grandiose tomb ever conceived, 40 life-sized statues. Michelangelo spent 8 months in the mountains choosing marble. Then the Pope changed his mind. "Paint my chapel ceiling instead," Michelangelo protested. "I am a sculptor, not a painter." Julius was immovable. 4 brutal years followed, lying on his back on scaffolding 70 feet up, paint dripping into his eyes, neck permanently damaged. The result was the Sistine Chapel ceiling, 500 square meters, 300 figures, 9 scenes from Genesis. The ignorant, the drunk Noah, the terror of the flood, the creation of Adam. God and man separated by the width of a finger that somehow contains the entire mystery of life. When the ceiling was unveiled in 1512, the art world fell silent, then exploded. Julius died. The tomb was reduced again and again, becoming Michelangelo's lifelong torment. From its wreckage came masterpieces anyway. The horned Moses with tablets of the law, so alive that people said you only had to tap his knee and he would speak. The bound slaves writhing against their unfinished stone now in Paris and Florence, symbols of the soul trapped in flesh. The Medici returned to power. In Florence, Michelangelo built the new sacristy and Medici chapel, tombs where night, Day, dawn, and dusk recline in eternal unease. Night in particular is unforgettable. A woman with owl and mask, breasts heavy with sleep, her unfinished back rough as if she is still emerging from the marble. In 1527, Rome was sacked by imperial troops. Michelangelo helped fortify Florence against the Medici, and fled when the city fell. Pardoned, exhausted, he returned to Rome for good in 1534 at the age of 59. Pope Clement VII had one last command: paint the altar wall of the Sistine Chapel with the Last Judgment. For 7 years, Michelangelo covered the wall with a vision of the end of the world. Christ is no gentle shepherd, but a muscular Apollo hurling damnation. Saints display the instruments of their martyrdom. The flayed skin of Saint Bartholomew bears Michelangelo's own tormented face. When it was unveiled in 1541, some called it obscene, others the greatest painting ever made. The Council of Trent later ordered loincloths painted over the nudes, but the power remained terrifying. At 71, he was appointed architect of St. Peter's Basilica. He tore up decades of plans, simplified everything, and raised the greatest dome in Christendom, a soaring hemisphere that still dominates Rome and inspired every capital dome from Washington to St. Petersburg. He never married. Art was wife, children, religion, everything. He wrote passionate poems to a young Roman nobleman, Tommaso dei Cavalieri, and to the brilliant poet Vittoria Colonna. In old age, he carved haunting late Pitas, half-finished figures where Christ and the Virgin almost melt into one another, as if the boundary between flesh and spirit had dissolved. On February 18, 1564, at 88, he died in Rome. Friends smuggled his body back to Florence in a bale of cloth so the Pope could not claim it. He was buried in Santa Croce amid a city in mourning. Michelangelo outlived Leonardo, Raphael, every pope he served, every rival. He turned marble into living flesh, fresco into thunder and lightning, architecture into prayer. He signed only one work because every other block he touched already carried his unmistakable fingerprint: intensity, grandeur, and a fierce belief that the human form, broken, suffering, defiant, is the clearest mirror of the divine. That is why 5 centuries later we still stand beneath the Sistine ceiling with our mouths open or in front of David feeling suddenly small, or gaze up at the dome of St. Peter's and feel the skies closer than we thought. He was not a comfortable genius. He was difficult, lonely, often cruel. But he gave us images that refused to die. In the end, the boy who grew up among stonecutters fulfilled his own prophecy. He set the angels free,